to show the concept of how it actually works, and then what some of the challenges and lessons learned were.
Okay.
And then what's next.
Okay. So hopefully, it doesn't sound like I'll be repeating.
You're doing a lot of pros and cons, was there?
Well, I'm just sort of introducing our stats and why we were motivated to use it, and then sort of personally the glitches we encountered. But also as part of that, just talk through what we published. So that'll be the bulk of it, really, just talking through the different pages.
We've got about 10 people currently ready, so that's good.
Keep an eye on timings. So we have a full 15 minutes.
So I just meant to say, with the slides as well, were they just in as same sort of thing in the order and everything?
Yeah.
It wasn't like...
Yeah, we didn't even put, I don't even know if they put our background in it.
So I just put them into the template and adjusted if any of your logos were on top of things that looked chaotic. They weren't.
Otherwise they're the same.
And we have nothing on slide.
Just get through this.
So this is the whole package they've got.
No, it's on mute at the moment.
Can you scroll down just so I can see?
just check.
So 21 is that. 21.
Yeah.
24 is.
I don't know why screen background is all the same
person
every
who's not.
last time.
She's the one who's not here.
Oh, yes.
Is she?
Yeah.
Sorry, they will all look
Yeah.
but that's just how they'll look.
That's fine.
We've just got a screenshot of what's
We're
Those are ones they don't know,
ready to
just
go
put them
live in a
if they've
couple
got questions
minutes.
about the
I think it should be.
I can delete them.
So if we've got 22
Someone
people
go-
watching, so we'll give it like 2
Because
more
I think we'll
minutes
just
and
do
then.
a background and-
Okay.
They can hear us, by the way.
Okay, are we ready?
And then that's more, and then the other ones are just in case the link didn't work, then I can still talk.
Can you put a link to the Google slides in the website?
In case the link didn't work.
Okay, hi everyone. Sorry for the delay and thanks so much for joining us. I think we've got a good amount of people already logged in and watching at the moment, so we're going to kick off now. So I'll just give you a quick summary of what the presentation's about, the idea of sharing seminars, and then we'll move on to Power BI. So just again, thank you so much for your patience with all the slight hitches we've had. If you don't have Google Drive and you can't access the slides that we've just circulated, then let us know and we'll be able to send them out to you. I know I'm about to send them out to some people who've got in touch currently, so hopefully that'll all be fine. Just one additional technical personnel problem we've had is that one of our presenters has been unable to make it today. So I'll share some of her work afterwards, and we've got a quick screenshot of that on the slide pack anyways. Okay, so Best Practice and Impact, for those of you who don't know, is a cross-GSS division providing a service for everyone and anyone who works with government statistics. Comprises of the Good Practice team, Quality Centre, Harmonisation, the Methodology Advisory Committee, and MAS, the Methodology Advisory Service. So we work with statisticians and others across government to improve the statistics by providing advice. We do consultancy, training, guidance. We've got champion networks, and we do a lot of facilitation as well. Perfect. So I've just had confirmation it's all working. Brilliant. So basically we're looking to identify the best practice, the good practice that's going on across government, and also potentially other sectors and internationally as well, and share that across the GSS. So that brings me on to sharing seminars. It's been identified quite widely that a lot of people in the GSS are sort of maybe working in silos a little bit. I'm sure everyone's been to a conference where, you know, a lot of the topics are mentioned that have been brought up at the previous conference, that type of thing. So we're using these as an opportunity to work together, learn from each other. So last time we used address matching, and we got some really good feedback about the impact that that had, and from the national statistician himself, John Pullinger as well. So the aim here is that everyone can learn from each other, sort of improve development, improve collaboration. And we're also trying to build that on networks like Slack as well. So in an ideal world, this seminar won't be the end of your work with each other, and will then provide future opportunities if there's a demand. So feel free to get in touch with us if you'd like us to put us in touch with some other people working on Power BI, maybe if there's an event or training that you think would be helpful. So we did a quick poll on Slido about people's experiences with Power BI, and it looks like most of you have maybe minimal experience, whether that's on the production side or as a user of the software. So just a quick overview. It's a Microsoft product. It's a collection of software services that you connect to data sources, and then you can produce visualizations and share them. So it takes form of dashboards usually, and as I'm sure we all know, they're a really popular tool to quickly present data in an interactive and accessible format. So for public engagement, presenting maybe lower level stats without the same burden, having to produce over and over again different tables, and allowing our policy and our operational colleagues to explore the data. So across government, it's being used to display and present and disseminate data internally and externally, so whether to our ops colleagues or to members of the public. And today we're going to give you a quick overview of how it can be used for different audiences. So we're looking internally and externally. So first up, we've got Max Semple, who's come all the way from Cardiff to our technology wonderland from Companies House, and he's going to talk to us a bit about how they've developed performance dashboards for internal use. And then we've got Sophie from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, MHCLG, and she's going to outline some of their interactive experimental publications and the challenges faced. So I think you're quite recent adopters at MHCLG, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a good place to start, and I think quite a lot of the audience should be able to sort of recognise that they're in a similar position to Sophie and Max of these. So our third speaker, who is going to present about the public service dashboards that ONS has produced and can't attend today due to sickness, has provided us with materials, and then we'll circulate them as well. Okay, and we'd really encourage any kind of questions, if there are further technical difficulties, to let us know via Slido, and our code for this presentation is #Y864, and it's on the bottom of that image that you can see on your screen. Perfect. So I'll move on to Max Semple from Companies House. Thank you for coming.
No, thanks for introducing me, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the journey that sort of we've been through at Companies House and how we've been trying to introduce Power BI across the sort of organisation. So if you can navigate on your slides to the first one for us, which is Companies House and their implementation of Power BI, and we'll kick off from there. So at Companies House, I manage the corporate insight team. In case you don't know, Companies House is a registry and stores all the information about companies. We get filings on a regular basis. We get annual filings. So everything that we do really is about data, storing data, managing the data. As a team, we produce a lot of the management information to support the business from top to bottom, as well as providing an analytical query service to internal and external customers, so tapping into that data to provide insight to people. Some of the examples of the outputs that we produce: we do corporate dashboards, we do monthly HR reports, so headcount is sick, for instance, and also we do some of the team productivity stats down to sort of granular level in the organisation. We're always looking for ways to try and improve the service that we offer to our customers, and some of the new technology out now, and Power BI being one of them, has made it some really interesting opportunities for us. So if we go on to the next slide, so where we were a year ago, is probably a good place for us to start. So we had some quite manually intensive processes in place. So when we extracted the data, we had to extract using a specific data mining tool, which would then sort of bring into distinct data sets. We'd then mine those data sets and combine them into sort of aggregate spreadsheets, which would then use to produce reports which would go out to the business. So there's quite a few steps in the process here. We commissioned a continuous improvement review of the processes, and we sort of recognised that we had over 100 spreadsheets that we were using on a monthly basis, which would be having to move data between one to another. And I don't know if that's something that seems familiar to a few of your areas, but as you can imagine, it's maybe not an ideal situation to be in. It's very time-consuming work for the team, and it sort of introduces chance for errors. When you've got to copy over sort of large amounts of data on a monthly basis, it gets monotonous, and there's chance for errors there. And the team do an amazing job with it, but it then does limit the amount of time that they've got to do analysis and creating engaging visuals, which is really what we're trying to do and get people to use the data within the reports. We knew we sort of needed to change this situation, and we set ourselves a number of tasks, and the business had sort of some desires what they wanted as well. So if we move on to the third slide, which was what was the task? So saying we got a number of points which we really wanted to address when we changed how we're doing our management information. So the first one was, as an organisation, we decided we wanted to increase the use of data to make evidence-based decisions. So that's at all levels. So if you see the little pyramid in the bottom right-hand corner, so we've got the strategic level in the organisation, that might be your executive board. You've got tactical level, which could be a sort of an operational level, a lot of the sort of middle and senior managers. And then down at an operational level, the granular information. We wanted everybody to be using data to make their decisions. So for us, that created a challenge, which was making the right information available to the right levels of the organisation and at the right time. So the second point that we had was creating one version of the truth, connecting the organisation from top to bottom. So we found that we probably had a situation where we produce aggregate information for things like our official stats, but then when we needed to produce granular data, that would come from a slightly different data set, or we'd be extracting it in different ways. That's all well and good, but sometimes it'd create differences between the data, and you'd go into some meetings where someone had our official statistics, for instance, someone else had some of the management information, and they'd be querying why you were getting two different bits of information which are meant to be saying the same thing. So for us, there was a challenge there about how we sort of structured the information and how we sort of then used it to produce data sets which could go from the top to bottom of the organisation, giving one view of the truth. The last point that we were getting asked about a lot was self-service data. As people increasing their skills with data and starting to use it more for these decisions, they're asking the question of why is it we're always having to come to you? Can't you give us? Those were the sort of main points that we were trying to address. So if we move on to the fourth slide now, which was actually how we sort of came about developing Power BI's dashboarding system. Hopefully this one is just a little picture which will give you an idea of how Power BI actually works. So we considered quite a few different options when we started, but we needed to think of what was going to fit in the short term and long term for us. At Companies House, we're going through a transformation program, and we wanted to make sure that anything that we implemented now was going to be fit for purpose in the future. We also wanted to consider what was available for the business, like within the business, and we didn't want to do anything that maybe we didn't want to bring in software if we already had something which could do the job. So Power BI was being tested in one of our directorates. They've been looking to trial upgrading our Office 365 package to an E5 package, which gives a lot of security benefits. But we also realised that that would potentially give us Power BI as a tool to use. So just to touch on some of our first steps using Power BI, we didn't actually start with any expertise. We weren't experts in this. We didn't have any training. We didn't have people in who were sort of formally necessarily having used this before. We found out it was quite easy to learn. The web guidance was really good for it as well, all the YouTube videos that are up. And we started with quite simple reports at first. And we didn't do anything too complicated. So we tried at the start creating things with one data set to solve one problem, and then we built and learned from that over time. So Power BI as a tool is really simple, as I said. It's based off Excel, but it's a lot more powerful, and you can play with a lot bigger data sets, and you don't have issues with it crashing. So in its simplest form, as you can see in the diagram, you might have one set of data, which you then upload into one report, and that could be anything. That could literally be a table in Excel with 20 numbers in it, and from that you can create visuals in the reports. So as you build in the complexity, you can actually add multiple data sources. So if you click on your PowerPoint, it should show hopefully the arrows coming across to show multiple data sets going into one report, and then you start to build up a data model. The benefit of this is, for us, for instance, it could be something like adding somebody's flexi time to workload information, which could let you calculate productivity information. And you can do this on a big scale then, and with as minimal input as possible. And once you have a number of these reports, you can then start pinning tiles. So when you create a graph or anything in a report, it's called a tile, and you can pin those onto the dashboards. So if you just want to summarize what you're showing in each report, you can put those onto a dashboard and perhaps get information from a few different areas, which to give someone an overall picture. So the main place that we used this at the start was for our corporate targets. So we have 8 public targets that we track at Companies House. There are also then a number of internal targets which sit underneath those. So we identified all the data sets that we're going to need to report on these targets. And we split them up into ones where we maybe had the data sources held centrally to the ones which we'd maybe have to go out and get data from other parts of the business. Some of the targets that we have are maybe just one number on a monthly basis from another part of the building, and we wanted to create an easy way for people to add that data. So one of the solutions for us was Power BI is great at connecting things in SharePoint. So it's got connectors in there. And if you have, for instance, a spreadsheet or a database in SharePoint, you can connect to that. And then when you update the data set, it will automatically update in Power BI. So that's a really powerful one for us, which is that we wouldn't always need to oversee everything that was going on. People would be able to put the sort of updates in there, or even if it was overriding a data set, so minimal data entry to change all the reports online. The benefit of this as well is you can set up scheduled refreshes to it. So you could have hourly refreshes, you could have daily, weekly, monthly, depending on what you were trying to do. If you had anything that you wanted to QC first before it goes in, then you can set manual refreshes and do that yourself. Some of the other things that we've done at the same time is we've been using Microsoft Forms to collect information, which you can then feed the responses straight into the dashboards, which is quite a neat way of collecting the information and then getting it straight in there. Final benefit like SharePoint for having your data sets is if you can store stuff on a local drive, or you can store it in any network drives you've got, but you have to start installing gateways to allow BI to access those data sets and set those scheduled refreshes, whereas SharePoint's one of these things that's integrated and they can connect to it really easily, and the connectors already exist. You don't have to do anything, which is really good for implementing things quickly. So once we've sorted our data sets for these corporate targets, we're able to build a report for each one of them. So sort of like what you can see in the picture on the PowerPoint, where you've got a number of reports and then they feed into one of these dashboards. So we picked out key tiles from each of the reports to show on the dashboard. So quite often that'd be RAG statuses. And what this did was it meant that you got a really high level summary, which you could go to, say, an exec board meeting at a strategic level, where they would just see their RAG statuses. The boards underneath then, if they needed to look into the detail of it as to why things weren't performing, they could click down into those tiles, which takes you to a report underneath containing lots and lots of data which they can navigate through. So hopefully now we can have a look at this in action. So if you click onto the next slide, I'd really love to show you the corporate target slides that we do, but unfortunately it's quite sort of sensitive information I can't really share right now. So what I've done is I've picked out the front page of our dashboards, which it sort of shows the functionality here. So this is a page that we're using as the landing page for our dashboards, which we've got information there from our annual official statistics. We've got some other stuff there which is from our management information tables, and then there's a couple of other bits which are in-house sort of management information. So straight away you can see on here, we've got the official statistics on one side and we've got management information on the other side. So that's two different data sets which we're then combining onto a dashboard to give people a quick view of a few different things that they're wanting to see. So I think what's best now is if you imagine that the official statistics of maybe one of our corporate targets, so the graphs on the left-hand side, the three of them, imagine that was a corporate target and you were wanting to look at what was going on there and why. So you'd be able to click on any of those tiles and it would take you to the report sitting underneath. So if you could click on the link which says annual official statistics, it should take you onto the report, which we've mocked up from our official statistics. One of my colleagues has done a really good job with this. Just to show you a bit of the functionality. So hopefully that should be loading up for everybody, and it's taking you onto a page which is companies register information. So this one is just, it's got a lot of information on there about the size of our register, effective register, total register, how many incorporations we get. And you can see at the top, we've got one graph there, but we've got the buttons at the top which are letting us navigate through the graph. So if you were to click on any of the buttons, you'll see that the numbers on the graph are changing just to show that. So what's been great about this is it's letting you show a lot of different information just in one graph. They're not having to go to different pages. You're not having really long reports. And at the bottom, you can see there's a bit with arrows which says 2 or 4. So you can navigate through. So if you go to the right, 3 or 4, we've got an overseas corporate body page. And this is just showing that we can have a map where we're plotting all this information on and give different ways of showing the data for people. And they're quite engaging. So we found within Companies House, there's been a lot of groups that weren't previously engaged with data who are now really on board with it. So it's just allowing us to tap into different groups of people. I think one of the things that we found is our organisation are now really on board with it, and we're starting to get a lot more demand. So if we go on to the next page, which is some of the challenges and lessons learned. So this is back on the PowerPoint now. We've got a few things which we found either difficult or some of them which helped us as well. So the first thing for us was data literacy. So we had a bit of a challenge at the start getting people to use the software. So we'd get to meetings and they'd be really engaged with it, but they wouldn't have looked at things in advance. So some of the meetings initially were dragging on a little bit because everyone got really excited and was wanting to look through the data, which shows how good it is, but it's just that bit trying to get people sort of upskilled in it. So the next point for us was the dashboard performance. So at the start, I think we had a bit of trial and error about how much we could put into one report or one dashboard before you were starting to have too much information and slowing it down. So the dashboards particularly, we tried to put quite a lot on there. But at the same time, it's quite an agile approach. So you can build a number of reports and you can decide which ones you're going to show on certain dashboards, and you can have dashboards linking together and create a good pyramid structure of the information. So working your way down through the data. The next point we had was a large increase in demand. So this was actually really good for us because we were trying to get the licenses approved for the whole business, and this actually helped us. But initially, when people saw what we could do, everybody started asking for dashboards, and everybody started asking for interactive reports. It was really good, but it did put a lot of pressure on the team, which then takes us down to the upskilling, which is both the team and the business is trying to get an increase in our skills to actually meet the demand, but then also upskilling the business at the same time. So just if we go on to the next slide, and that's will be the last one for us. So just some of the things which are next for us. So we want to expand our coverage. So we've got a few initiatives that we want to take up next, which is some directorate specific tools. So we've got HR dashboards for our HR business partners, which will help hopefully let them navigate through sort of sick information quite easily and pick out any trends and do some analysis that way. We also want to do a productivity tool for managers. At the moment, we've got Flexi system, which sits in one place, and then we've got productivity information in another place, and we want to blend those two together, which will be an interesting one for us with GDPR and whatnot. So we've been engaging on that front to try and get ready for when we want to do that. We want to publish externally a lot more. So our official statistics would be one example, which we found internally it's engaged a new group of users, so we want to take that externally. We want to start getting real-time information into the dashboards. At the moment, we're doing a lot of scheduled refreshes. We're producing a lot of information for boards or on a weekly basis for certain customers. So there's some options there to connect straight into our databases and also connecting to like APIs. So we can connect our own API, for instance, and stream that data in. Artificial intelligence would be a great one. So one of the tools in Power BI is like a little mini chatbot. So you can actually go in and ask for what data you want. So for instance, you could ask how many incorporations for companies have happened between April and June 2019, and it will bring that information back. Bit of work to do on that one, but that is what it's designed to do. The next thing for us will be rolling out the licenses. So that's probably what I'll be doing quite soon, is trying to get licenses rolled out across the business, and then, or at least what my colleagues will be rolling the licenses out, but then actually getting people to use the dashboards across the business. So some of our stuff, for instance, things like customer satisfaction, people, we already have reports set up, and it's just about then sharing it out to the people who need to see the information and getting them upskilled. And that leads into sort of learning programs that we're going to have to do, which is both, as I said, on the team, is training up, but also across the business, getting people to use the tool. So that's me done. So the last page, I've just got some of my contact information there. So feel free to contact me. And I don't know if we had any questions or not that came through.
I think we've got a couple that we might ask you now because you just touched on or alluded to some of the content, and then we'll probably do more to both of you, though they're all to both of you, and to anyone else who's knowledgeable about Power BI. So I think you mentioned GDPR. We've got someone asking what the risks are when you're using it to publish sensitive or unpublished data.
So I think the big thing for us was we actually see this as an advantage because we control the data set. So if you send out a spreadsheet to somebody, they can effectively do what they want with that spreadsheet. Whereas if you share them a report and you've locked that data down, they can't actually access the data. You can control what they see. You can also use things like row level security. So when we're looking at productivity information, one of the things might be that you'd have a list of team leaders. If you only wanted your team leaders to see their team, you can set up the row level security to filter out the data so they don't actually get access to any of the data which isn't to do with their team. So there's some really powerful tools in there. It is a big consideration. Obviously, whenever you're trying to put more data out there for people, it is something. At the moment, we've used a lot of the stuff we're using isn't stuff that needs to go through GDPR, which has been great for us, avoiding some of the sensitive things, but that is an area that we're going to be moving into, and we've been touching bases with our data protection officers around it.
That's brilliant. And then I guess the other one that would be related to that is it possible to export the underlying data of a dashboard once it's shared publicly? Or I suppose not just publicly, but to whoever your audience is.
So you have some controls on that. So if you don't put any controls in, people can export some of the stuff, but there are things. So for instance, when you build a data model, you can hide a data set that's in there. So when you publish it, they can press export the data and they won't see that table, or you can actually stop people from exporting the data. So there are some controls in there to not let you do it. When you publish stuff online, you typically put into, if it's within your organization, you put into a workspace, it's called. And the workspace, people generally have access to a lot of stuff, but then you have an app that you publish to. And when you publish to an app and then give that access to the business, people can't generally see so much of the data and they don't get those options to export it.
Is that app run through Power BI, or is it a different?
Yeah, so it's like a Microsoft. It's in Office 365 as an app. So it sort of sits within Power BI. It basically creates like a group in Office 365 but without an email address.
Yep.
So it's sort of the data's stored there and it's all in Microsoft, the same sort of security sort of setup.
Brilliant. No, that's really interesting. Thanks so much, Max. We'll move on to Sophie's presentation now, and then we'll have more questions. So if anyone's got any questions, we're still live on Slido. Please keep them coming. And just to really quickly clarify, as we mentioned earlier, this was originally meant to all be broadcast, so the click through with the slides and the demonstration. So apologies again for that slight hitch. Thanks. Sophie.
Hello. So I'm Sophie Ferguson, and I work on land use change statistics, which are published by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And in this talk, I'm going to start by just briefly introducing you to the statistics and our motivation for using Power BI. And then hopefully you'll be able to click through the hyperlink in the slides, and I'll talk you through the interactive report that we published using Power BI. And then I'll also share with you pros and cons of the experience and glitches and things that we'd like to work on further. So first off, to introduce the statistics I work on. The land use change statistics. These are national statistical release, which are published annually, and they give the number of addresses changing from and to residential use and the areas of land that have changed from one use to another. And we get the data from our data partners Ordnance Survey, and we map it against local authority, green belt boundaries and areas of high flood risk. And we publish it in a bulletin format and also in live tables. There's quite a lot of live tables. And this year, alongside the annual release, we've also published a consultation on the statistics. And this is because we want to see how we might better meet user needs with the national statistics. Based on previous user engagement work with external users such as local authorities, academics, campaign groups and other government departments, we believe that there's a role for broader land use statistics and data that quantifies and categorises the developed environment and the split between developed and non-developed users, not just the in-year changes between these users, which land use change statistics reports. So as part of that consultation, this year we also published experimental statistics on land use in England. And that, just like land use change statistics, incorporated a bulletin, which was like a PDF document summarising data, and live tables, but also an interactive report. So if you click through to the second slide, you can see there what the bulletin looks like and what the hyperlink to live tables would look like on the landing page, and there's also an interactive report. And the reason behind exploring publication through an interactive report was that it was an opportunity for us to more fully engage with our users, to offer better flexibility, more control for the audience, and therefore better insight. And we felt like the land use data was the perfect data for that, because essentially at its most basic, it is just what is where. And also because we'd never published this data, we had a completely clear slate. So publishing an interactive report was the sort of best case we could do. And also by doing that, we could provide sort of proof of concept as to where we could take land use change statistics in future, following feedback from users in the consultation. So if you click on to slide 3, the argument for using PowerBI was, as I've said with the land use data, it's basically what is where. So it's a very simple long form data set, which is exactly how you want data going into PowerBI. With lots of data we have in the department, it's not typically long form data. So this was a source of data which didn't really need transforming in any way and could be kind of plugged straight into Power BI, just as Mark's described, like an Excel spreadsheet kind of thing. Because it was very location based, it meant that being able to produce data in the form of interactive maps was irresistible for us in terms of getting messages across to users and engaging with users. And as I've said, with the what and where, it meant that we had 2-level summary selection. So users could either pick based on local authority, based on where, or they could pick based on land use, based on their interest. So that again made using something like Power BI and publishing through the means of an interactive report really attractive to us in terms of engaging with our users. In terms of an argument against Power BI, we were publishing at the end of May, so we have only just published over a month ago. And we say when we're going to publish in advance, and we like to honour that commitment. As a department, we had an IT transition in February, and Power BI was part of our new tech suite. But we then only got sort of green lit to use Power BI and publish externally with that in mid-April. So the whole time it was really running up against our deadline of the 31st of May, and that was a very strong argument against being able to publish with Power BI, simply that we wouldn't have the time to use it and deliver it. Similar to how Mark's described, we didn't have anyone within the department who had used it. So for me personally, it was a very steep learning curve. There was nobody within the department I could I could sort of bang heads with, kind of thing. And just as Mark's described, I relied heavily on user forums and things like that. But also, it is to be stressed that Power BI, and I know a lot of colleagues in the department have found this, is extremely easy to use. So it is a very quick to grapple with technology, and that's part of the temptation with it. The other thing is that the data set we got, the land use data set, as you can imagine, it is what is where in England, and it is 96 million rows of data. And that data is geospatial data. So each point is a sort of hexadecimal description of that polygon. So it is vast amount of data. And so that meant that when it came to using it in Power BI, though you do have the capacity to query things in Power BI, that wasn't really available to us, because I think that you can have massive data sets in Power BI. Actually, querying it, there's a limit to about kind of 1 million to do a direct query. So what we did was we had all the data in SQL, and we then piped summary tables from SQL and imported them into Power BI and produced everything that way. And I hadn't used SQL before February, so that was another steep learning curve in order to make this all happen. But we did, and if you'd like to click on the next slide and then control click on in the word interactive report, should bring up the dashboard, well, the report. So the report consists of 5 pages, and the landing page is where users get a brief summary, the tree map at the top, that bar where it's sort of gridded at the top, that's called a tree map. And that's where we summarise England national trends and land use. And then on that page, users can select a local authority. So you can pick the drop-down cursor and you can scroll down and pick any local authority you wish. And once you've selected that local authority, the graphics should change. And also on the map, it will highlight where that local authority is in the country. You'll notice that the percentage of the local authority that is developed, that changes. You can move the cursor over the tree map, over the grid, and you'll get summary information. For example, that the land type is developed or non-developed, what kind of land use it is, and the percent of the local authority that it is. It's colour-coded to be in theme with our departmental colours. And there's also at the bottom of the slide, it points you to click through to the next tab, so that on page 2 you can select a land use. So if we click on the cursor at the bottom, that should take you through to page 2. And then once it's loaded, you can go to the drop down and you can select a land use. And once you've selected a land use, for example, I'm going to select communal accommodation, the map will change shading, and the map shows how the percentages of a land use vary across the country as a proportion of the England total. But also there's a number that changes to show what percent of land is used for that land use. And then also there's a line chart which shows which local authorities have the greatest proportion of their local authority area for that land use. So essentially it's sort of ranking local authorities for that land use as well. And then because with land use change statistics, part of the data we give on that is the land use change in greenbelt and high flood risk. So we wanted to do the same with these, with the statistics on land use. So if you click through to page 3, that summarises land uses within in local authorities that have land designated as greenbelt. So again, you can pick a local authority and you can see how its proportion of greenbelt, how the land is used within that. And the percentage of the local authority designated as greenbelt land, that will change. And the percent of the designated greenbelt land that is developed will also change according to the local authority that is selected. We also give on that page a graphic that doesn't change, summary data on how the greenbelt across England is split between different land uses. That's the bar at the top of the page. And then also for that local authority, how their land use is used more broadly across the local authority as a whole. That is also given the tree map at the bottom of the page. But again, you can move your cursor over and it will highlight different land uses, tell you whether it's a developed or non-developed use, and the percent of greenbelt, for example, for that selected authority, how much of that is used for that land use. Then page 4, that is going to give you same kind of information like for greenbelt, but for areas of high flood risk. So I don't know how much people want me to talk over that. That's sort of the same thing. And then the final page of our interactive report are the technical notes. So this is where we can give users information about where the data's come from, how it's been quality assured, how they can get in touch with us if they want further information or to point out any issues they may have with it. Also quite important is to show how the land uses are categorised. So underpinning the data is 28 different land use types, and they're split into more broad categories of developed land or non-developed land use groups. So hopefully you can see how you agree with us that the data lent itself very well to an interactive report, and that was all made possible in such a short timescale by using something like Power BI. If we hadn't been able to use Power BI, I did look into something like R Shiny, which some of you might have heard of, but there were issues with how we could publish R Shiny and how we could publish it externally. Whereas if you click now to slide 9, all those other slides are just print screens in case the hyperlink to the interactive report, because I didn't know quite how the presentation was going to work.
So that's slide 16
so
on the version
slide
we've
16
circulated.
on the slide pack. So here I'll just talk about some of the challenges. So yeah, we only knew in mid-April that we would actually be able to publish externally, and that we could publish externally using Power BI. And the way that works is we publish to the Power BI website. So we don't host it as a department. It's a hyperlink that we send you via a hyperlink to the Power BI website. And that's why we couldn't use R Shiny. I think there were restrictions around how you would host the R Shiny data. And I think that maybe comes into the point the question Holly asked about data being accessible, and I think Power BI, they sort of close off the data to the users on your behalf, so you don't have to worry about them being able to get to the underlying data when you publish externally like that. So that's why we could do it that way. But one of the main issues we had, so a week before publication, I was told that we cannot publish a dashboard. So I had to rapidly change everything so that it was an interactive report and not a dashboard. So I don't know if when Mark was talking, you were using dashboard and report interchangeably, or maybe you're probably a lot more experienced than me. But my experience with this and publishing this externally is that you cannot publish externally a dashboard. And that is, for me, at the time, it was a shame, because the way in which you can convey data in a dashboard and the user can sort of just scroll up the screen, it means you don't have to think about what you want that first hit to be when you're trying to get information across. Whereas when it's a report, I did. So I had to think about what I wanted on each page, and I had to think about what impact I wanted. So what would be the first page? And I basically have to rely on users scrolling through each page to get the information I want to convey to them. The other thing is that they don't let you label the page tabs. So on when Mark was looking at his, I did notice when you clicked at the page tabs at the bottom, it sort of brought up a little menu box. So I am going to ask Mark how he got that.
You have that.
Do I?
Yeah, you have that here.
Oh, that doesn't come up whenever I do it. So
This is Explorer, so it might be a
so
Chrome issue.
exploring Chrome. So that is a good thing
Chrome's
that we have all
better.
learned here today. So yeah, maybe you should be telling all your users to use it in Explorer, which maybe I will do in future. So yeah, so that was one thing I had to get my head around, that we couldn't publish as a dashboard, which would have been more favourable, because I think the way we are now with our phones, we're used to being able to get everything all in one hit and pretty instantaneously, whereas we've got a bit lazy, so relying on people to sort of scroll through pages. So that was one thing, maybe a bit clunky. I had to add it to the bottom of the slide, what they could expect to see if they clicked through the tabs, what would be on each subsequent page. The other thing is that you have to choose a format. So choose it either for kind of laptop display or choose it for a phone display. And we were time constrained, to be honest, and we chose it for a laptop display. But that is definitely something we'll think about going forward, what is best when it comes to our users' experience, whether realistically users are all using it on their phone, and it would have been better to have it formatted as a phone display, whereas in a laptop we're relying on them to turn their phone to a kind of landscape orientation and view it that way, which is not the best. The other thing is, due to our own constraints as a department, we couldn't embed the Power BI on the landing page for our statistics. We could only have it as a hyperlink. And that's definitely something we'd want to change going forward, because I don't think it has quite the same impact. The other thing with the interactive map is that there are loads and loads of mapping features in Power BI, and there's loads of different graphic options within Power BI. But what I wanted in terms of an interactive map, I actually had to download and import, and that was a shape map. And I've put some sort of screenshots on the slide to show how that was done, because I know that's something lots of people have asked questions, and that took a sort of disproportionate amount of time to figure that out, to get the topo JSON that we needed to produce a custom map, because if you just click on UK, you literally get Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, Wales, and that's it, and that is not good enough granularity for our purposes. The other thing is getting the percentages updated. So that is within Power BI, it's a card, is how they sort of describe it. But with Power BI, they only give percentages of the grand total, and that didn't really fit my purpose. So that came down to having to create columns within SQL where it would update and select on that column for percentages. So little niggly things like that. My email address is on the slide, so if there's anything that you want to ask, questions that you think of later today, please do get in touch. Otherwise, I think that's it.
Thanks, Sophie. That's brilliant. And a lot of the questions that we've had have already been answered, so that's even better. We've had a couple about using the shape files and how the maps are generated. Do you just get yours from the Geo portal?
So with the you can convert anything into a topo JSON. You can convert any shapefile. There are, I don't know if I put a link to it on the final slide, but there are websites you can find online where they'll convert any shapefile to a topo JSON. I did that. One of mine ended up in Romania, another one ended up in Egypt, and then finally our departmental geographer produced one, and I used that. And I didn't try and produce one myself, but yeah, that was a real fiddle. But once you learn how to do a custom map, I produced a custom map for someone, showed them how to do it, and I did it in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It was so powerful, so quick. But that was the one fiddly thing that took a while to kind of understand and wasn't necessarily really obviously transparent when looking through user forum. And a lot of that, I think, is because there are so many different map options through Power BI, so actually isolating which one suits your purpose.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like that's maybe something that a lot of people would be interested in having some guidance around, and we can help with that potentially. Just another question for both of you about the sort of the processing power that's required to help Power BI run smoothly. Have you struggled at all? Have you found that having too many graphics has a negative impact? Does sort of performance depend on how much data you've loaded? I mean, you mentioned quite sizable amounts in terms of rows. So
yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, we would have had the data, the 96 million rows data piped directly into Power BI, and then being able to do all the querying within Power BI and have it really streamlined that way. But it wasn't possible. It wasn't possible to directly query data of such a large size. And then when I looked into it, I think there is a sort of 1 million plus limit. I think so. Yeah. So I was limited to being able to import the table, the summary tables I produced, and then querying that. But Mark might know more.
Yeah, I think from our point, it was like there's probably a difference as well. If you get the enterprise version, you get the pro version. So if you've got pro license for each person, I think you get there's the smaller data limit. Whereas if you have an enterprise version across the organisation, they sort of combine the limits, so you can have a bit more there. The bit we found was, so we said about dashboards and reports earlier. So because we're using ours internally, we're doing dashboards and reports sitting underneath a lot of us, so we can get away with it and use those dashboards. We found at the start, we tried to put loads of stuff onto the dashboards, and if you think they're drawing on all the data sets from the report, so every time it tries to load up, if you've got a graph from each different report, it's trying to load the data model for each report. Maybe not in its entirety, but we found there's a limit to how many visuals you can have on there. And there's a performance tool on there which sort of says how long stuff's taking. You can click on that, and so you can tell if it's just your computer's on a slow internet for once, or whether it's actually having problems. But that's a big thing as well as your internet connection. So it's, if you're viewing reports online, it's loading everything through. So if you've got really bad internet connection, it's probably not going to work very well. Whereas if you've got good connection, things load up really quickly and it's great.
Excellent. You mentioned earlier updating over SharePoint.
Yeah.
Is that around version control, or would different file versions pass through?
So I think you can use the different sort of versions in that. I haven't really looked at it too much, but you can obviously roll them back, and it will use whatever version you've got currently there. So if somebody's gone in and put something bad in there, I think that's when a lot of the sort of scheduled updates come in. So it might be the case that you want something to update on a Sunday at midnight, so you can set that scheduled update, but you've got to QC it by the Friday or something. But yeah, for us, it was just the stuff that we're using, where it made it quicker and sort of more seamless for us, especially even if we were inputting the data ourselves or copying a data set in there, we could drop the data set in, and then instead of having to go into report and press and refresh and stuff, it just automatically then.
Do you export your do you import your data sets, or do you use a query runner?
So at the moment, a lot of our stuff is static things because we're trying to run in parallel at the moment with what we've already been doing. So we pull out data sets, but instead of now pulling them out and then having a data set, putting that to an aggregate table and then creating reports, we're just connecting straight to those data sets. So there is a couple of stages there. So our long-term one, we are, as an organisation, looking at sort of data warehousing and things, which we will then be tapping straight into that. But as it stands, because we're running in parallel with, here's a data set, we'll connect to that data set. It might be then that we're using business objects to pull a lot of information, so we'll pull a big report out on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, whatever it is, and then instead of having to maybe go in and update it, press refresh, we just drop the data set into the folder, replace the file that was in there kind of thing, and then it just automatically picks it up and refreshes.
sense. Sorry, there was a question I've just scrolled past. Could you maybe just elaborate a little bit more on the reasons that they gave for not being allowed to publish dashboards and why you had to upload as a publication instead?
I honestly don't know. It was Mark Gregory in our department who broke it to me.
Just doesn't do it.
Yeah, just computer says no.
BI just doesn't let you publish dashboards.
Yeah,
when
it
you
wasn't.
can't.
It wasn't anything other than from PowerBI. There was.
Okay.
It wasn't.
So it wasn't
was
any
from
kind of
PowerBI.
statistical
Oh,
disclosure
no.
control or anything like that.
It's purely down to capabilities with their website publishing it. I think. I don't know if maybe you could and now you can't, or no, I think it's just something they need to work on, and eventually they probably will let you. But it might come down to, like Mark says, that it's just then you've got loads more data that's needs to be drawn on and simultaneously published, and maybe it's just after that.
I think the one we've been looking at was how you, because you were saying you have to use hyperlink to put it on the website at the moment, because we've got the same issue, which is I think GDS don't let you put interactive things on at the moment.
Right.
So we've sort of been looking at the ways, and obviously, as you said, it's quite nice if you press publish, Microsoft sort of post it themselves, so you can at least get a link to put on, but it's still it's nicer when you open your stats page and it just pops up on there.
A bit like a sort of YouTube screen or something. Yeah. No, that would have been ideal, but we didn't have the capability to do that. But something probably might do in the next day or so is just have a JPEG picture of the landing page of the interactive report and have that hyperlinked from maybe our landing stats page instead of just the words interactive report with the hyperlink underneath that. So just thinking a way around that.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much. We're kind of running out of time a little bit. We've got on the slides, for those of you that have them, a quick screenshot of the blog that Sophie Davies wrote. So that's about the public service data dashboards that ONS has put together. They bring together a range of data from different public services, and Sophie's also she's a different Sophie, it's all confusing. Sophie Davies is happy to answer questions about those, and their team is also looking for some feedback. So if you've got time or are interested, that would be really helpful. And then I think finally we've got Lizzie, who's from NHS Digital, I believe, has also put a link up to some products that they've developed. So that's on Slido if you're interested. We've also got a Slack channel on the GSS Slack. So we'd encourage you to maybe ask some of these questions there as well, so you can interact a bit more with other users and producers. And last but not least, I just wanted to confirm, Adam has asked, are these, I suppose maybe yours, Max, because yours is a publication, isn't it? Are they going to be live for a wee while for people to access?
Yeah.
Perfect. Adam would like at least a week or so.
Okay.
Brilliant. So just to round off, we're holding the next sharing seminar in September this year. If you've got any questions, please fire them over to elizabeth.brankley@ons.gov.uk. We're going to share this, podcast, whatever it's become, on the GSS website, and we'd encourage you to join the Slack channel, as I mentioned. So just to update you on future sharing seminars, we're looking at Monte Carlo simulations, data linking, and statistical disclosure control as possible next topics. So if there's any particular interests that you have, then do get in touch with us and we'll try and get that. Likewise, if you're working on any of those topics and you'd like some help or some support from your colleagues and peers across the GSS, please let us know. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll probably circulate some feedback forms too. And I believe you're both happy if people get in touch, right? Yeah. Put your contact details on, so you have no choice.
It would be good to know what feedback you get as well. So, for example, for my purposes, how we can improve it.
Well, one of your colleagues has actually got in touch. So you can speak to him. But thanks everyone for joining in, and good luck with your future work on PowerBI. Thank you.